Good morning and welcome to the ChinWag. I'm Richard Vobes. Today I want to talk about your palate and the food that you eat. Excuse me, I've still got this wretched little clearing of the old throat from a small, I was going to say illness, but an unwell cold, flu, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes, actually, we know that colds and things can also affect your palate and the choice of food that you have a tendency for. But I'm just aware that over the last, I suppose, 30 years, that my palate has changed. I no longer crave sweet things. I enjoy the occasional chocolate and things like that, but I don't crave it in the way that I used to. Now, I have, of course, because of my interest in eating as healthily as possible, trained myself and weaned myself off a number of things. But when I was far younger, I used to put sugar in the tea and in the coffee and that sort of thing. And now anything like that is too sweet for me. So my palate has changed, and of course that was orchestrated. But there are foods that I used to eat, that I used to like, that I no longer like. And I can eat much, I suppose, blander food these days. I don't crave the sort of sauces and relishes and the additional stuff to sort of spice food up. I can, and I do enjoy just the more natural taste of foods. I know that there are a lot of commercial outlets selling fast food, and a lot of that has things like mayonnaise in it. I mean, you can't seem to buy a sandwich in the UK from a supermarket or a sandwich outlet, pre-packaged sandwich, that doesn't have mayonnaise in it, as if you've got to have this default wetness. Now, some people prefer salad cream, which is a different animal from mayonnaise, in their sandwiches. And some, like me, are quite happy to have the basic ingredients, perhaps the chicken and the salad, or chicken and tomato, or ham and tomato, or cheese and tomato, or whatever it is, without anything extra. But it does seem that you can't buy just those things. The only thing that I seem to prefer more than not spice, but sauces and weird additives, is a bit of black pepper. I find that really enhances, and maybe a little bit of salt. But even so, my salt usage has reduced. When I was younger, I felt I needed much more salt. Perhaps on fish and chips over here in the UK, you'd have salt and vinegar on them. Excuse me. But it does seem that I can have less and less of these things and just go more for the natural food. Now, is that to do with age, or is that just to do with maturity, which in some ways is a similar thing, but not the same, because as you mature, you have gone through phases. And the current phase is that I'm not so much inclined in that. But I noticed that as my parents got older, they almost returned back to having the sweeter things. And it may be that the palate was less sensitive to the nuances of food, and that over time, of course, the palate, as they got older, perhaps wasn't working in the same way that it once was, and so they needed the extra flavouring. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. Has your palate changed? What foods do you no longer eat that you once used to gobble up on a regular basis? Has your palate changed? And is that something that you have trained yourself to do, or is that just the maturity of life? Things that you thought, I relish this, and now I don't. I've started to eat. I found on the shelf a non-oil based peanut butter. I went off peanut butter a long time ago because of all the horrible oils, but that was the cheap ones. Then I discovered actually the more expensive ones, and okay, I'm prepared to pay for more expensive food and less of it to have the quality these days than I used to. Of course, bringing up children, you sacrifice a hell of a lot of things because you need cheap and cheerful just to get through the day. But now that I'm pretty much on my own, and occasionally when Julia is with me, we will choose higher quality food, which might be more expensive, but is purer and has less of the additives. And I really notice the difference, and I really appreciate the difference. And I'm finding that less is more. So interested in your thoughts on that, on food in today's ChinWag. Nice and simple and nice and easy. Let's have a look at the comments then and see what people are talking about from previous episodes. Should we return to logs and coals was a storyline or a feature line, I suppose. And Scott FW says, this brings to mind a recent book by Ruth Goodman, The Domestic Revolution, How the Introduction of Coal into Victorian Homes Changed Everything. Circa 2020 with 330 pages. And she indeed does show how it changed everything, what foods were prepared and how they were cooked, what cleaning agents were used, and how homes were designed and what industries went where and more. That does sound like an interesting book actually to go and buy and find out how having coal, which presumably is that basically what it's saying is how being able to run a domestic cooker and heating system in the house, because prior to coal, what were people doing to keep warm? That would be an interesting subject to explore. So thank you very much for that. Bullet Tube says in response to, does it pay? I can't remember what the thing. Does it pay to be loyal? That's right. And that was what I was talking about yesterday. Yes time? There we are. That's the bastardization of yesterday and last time. The place I worked at for 30 years repaid my loyalty by laying me off because I was at least 50 years old and had been there for at least 25 years. Oh, that's loyalty for you, isn't it? My supervisor fought to keep me, saying that he would need 3 extra mechanics to replace me. But to no avail. Modern businesses today consider their labour force as an expense that needs to be reduced rather than an asset. Loyalty to one employer needs to be reciprocated, not ignored. And I would agree with you. And that does seem that some of the older, more principled ways of doing things have been pushed aside. I am often accused of being nostalgic and looking back. And I continually argue that the reason that I do look back is I feel that very often we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, that some of the ways that we used to do things, some of the methods and the attitudes that we had, the way we did things, not all of them, but some of them were really good, but we seem to have lost those in our progression to do things. And I think loyalty is one of those things that seems to have been thrown away in many ways. Loyalty used to be something that was regarded very important, and I still think it's important. I think if you believe in your workforce, if you pay them right and you trust them and you give them responsibility and loyalty, that they will work much harder. A happier workforce is going to give a hell of a lot more than an oppressed one. And it seems so obvious, but I don't know why bosses don't seem to understand this very basic thing. Tina McCloughlin, I'm sorry if I've bastardized your name, says, you're right about texting. I'm a very sensitive person, so sometimes I read into texts wrongly and think I've done something to offend, and then spend hours trying to think of what I've done wrong, only to find out it was just me all the time and my silly, sensitive mind. I wish I wasn't like that. It would save me having so much anxiety. Daft bugger that I am. Tina, I think we all do that to a certain degree. I know I do. You said something off and you think, oh, maybe I could have worded that a bit better, but hopefully they know what I mean. Because often we are time poor, or at least we think we are. We're so busy trying to get things done because we want to get on to the next thing that we don't often, I think, spend enough time doing the task that we're doing now. Because sometimes I think we feel that we have too much to do. Excuse me, playing my hooter. Matt says, does it pay to be loyal? He says, it's funny you say that. I always see animals in people. Oh, okay. A lot of people say to me that my collie, Bluebell, looks similar. So he's beginning to look like his dog, I gather. Is that what you're saying? I do love camping, but I don't drive, so it's difficult carrying everything on a long distance on trains and buses with a dog in tow. I imagine that would be damn near impossible, wouldn't it? Unless you're going extremely light. I love wild camping in the High Weald, as I used to live in Uckfield in Sussex. It's so beautiful. But I don't need to travel far to find peace and quiet. And you're very lucky if you're in an area where you don't actually need to travel far. It does seem down here in the southeast, there are still some places in which you can find that peace and quiet. That's true. But they seem to be disappearing very rapidly as more and more of farmers' fields are being covered with new builds. Louise Lage. Now, Louise, you sent me an email about camping, which was fascinating, and I will reply to it. But very briefly, she was saying in Canada, where she lives, that campsites are very different to the ones in the UK. She seemed to think that the ones, and she's quite right really, a number of campsites are quite small and people are jammed quite close to each other. In the UK, we don't feel it's quite like that. But in Canada, of course, you've got a lot more space. And so your campsites are not like ours, i.e. a farmer's field with people, round the edges or whatever in allotted plots, but actually in what to us would be like big park country land. So it's a very big difference. I'll email you back a bit later on today. Loyalty, she says, though, for the consumer seems to be nothing more than a scam. I was a loyal customer for 30 years to my cable stroke phone stroke internet company, only to realise that they had charged newer customers far less than I was paying. When I complained, they gave me some silly one-year deal, but on the whole, the service was still deficient, considering my loyalty. I don't like to move my services, so I resisted, but eventually I did this year and saved over $75 a month. That's about £48 sterling, she says. As far as these loyalty card points and systems are concerned, they are really just an illusion, and that's what I believe, that they're just an illusion. We think we're getting a deal, but in reality, the cost of the items are inflated to cover any point system benefits. And how could it be otherwise, really? The fact that they're claiming that you're going to get money off. These companies are clearly in business to make money, and as much money as they can, particularly if they have shareholders. And so the concept that they would give you for being loyal money off is, of course, quite ridiculous, because they need to maximize their profits in order to keep the shareholders happy. And if they're then, which you can understand staff having a discount because they work for the company, and it's the old-fashioned perks that we used to have. Perks. Do you remember those things? Used to get perks if you worked for a company. I don't know whether people still get perks as such, but the fact that one of these large corporate, like a clothing store, for example, or big supermarket store, wants to promote a discount, why would they bother? I'm guessing the psychology has to be that, if we go here, we get points off, and so therefore we will get more for our money rather than going over there. And really, it's no more than an advertising scam to get you to continue to shop at one brand or one store, one type of store, than scattering your money elsewhere. And as Louise says, there's the illusion that you're getting a little bit more, but I don't know that you really are. Mark Burgess says loyalty cars seem to have had their day. Supermarkets seem more interested in competing on advertising that their prices are lower. It always surprises me when advertisers like a supermarket will talk about the other company and actually advertise the other company at the same time, so that you start to think, well, you're comparing the prices with this one down the road. Maybe I will go down the road to have a look for myself. So I don't know that it really works. He also goes on to say that, yes, big companies don't reward for loyalty, but I tend to avoid shopping around because I don't like the hassle of having to change things unless absolutely necessary. So I stay with the company on that basis. And so I guess I like to show loyalty to the local tradesman, like the guy who looks after my garden, because not only does he do a good job, you get to know the person and you build a rapport, and that means that you feel you get a fair price for the work they do. Well, I think a lot of people are don't change. They may be fed up with something, and as you say, it's the hassle sometimes, the hassle of changing. Whereas if they take the hassle away and make change, and some companies do that now, like changing your mobile phone to a different company, thanks to the government intervening and saying, right, we want to make this much more streamlined so that people can do that. That's one thing. But I absolutely agree with you that actually, if you get to know people, it's the people really you do business with. And large companies suffer from this. They cannot provide you with something that small businesses can. They can offer you cheaper prices and try and give the illusion that they're being fair to you. But if you work with smaller companies and the small companies do value you, which they ought to because they're a small company, and treat you with respect and decency and all of that, their prices may be a bit higher, but you're dealing with people. And when you deal with people, it's that feeling of respect, that feeling of being wanted, required, needed, being important, is what will sell and win them to you or you to them. And I think that's very important. And there is a certain satisfaction of, in actual fact, being a customer of a small company, thinking that you're supporting that company and keeping the money going in the locality, as I do with my logs that I get from John, my woodman, who gets the logs from about 5 miles from my house, where they're sourced. And so that's how I fuel my house, in terms of not my electricity, but I don't cook and I don't heat with the electricity. I cook and heat and warm the water with the logs. And so I know that my money's going into the local economy, and I feel much happier about that than giving to big companies who may be buying the fuel overseas and have no control on the price. And so I think that's a much better way of doing things. Not everybody agrees. Kerry Baldwin says car insurance is the worst. £1 extra the first year, £5 the second year, and then by the third year, if you don't move anything, they think they can get away with it. And you're absolutely right. Those people who are loyal with the company and they just think, well, I'll just renew and just let it roll over, you don't often see the price hike that's just gone up. And you're not comparing the market, of course, to see actually if you're getting the best deal. It is ridiculous, because I think the opposite would work much better for those companies if they're continually trying to find the best and cheapest deal and move you and say, look, we will look after you. Rest assured, you can renew with us and it'll always be the cheapest. And if we do have to put the prices up, we'll be in touch with you. I think a company that treats you as a human being with respect is going to be better and survive better and make a better profit and be a nicer company to deal with than one that's just fleecing you and trying to get away with it and thinking at the end of the day we've got millions of customers, so if a small proportion work out that we're actually fleecing them, it doesn't matter. But I think that small proportion slowly get around. For example, I once was with a dreadful mobile phone company, and their internet on the phone was just awful, and their customer service was awful. I would never go back. I was once with Sky Television, and I had a ruckus with them about 25 years ago over a box. Because the box failed, and I'd only had it a short amount of time. They refused to replace it, and I had to pay £60 for it. And I said, I'm not going to. Just shut the account. I'm going somewhere else. I don't need television now, but I would never go back. And so they may have improved their services. They may be a much better company. I don't know. But I feel I would never go back. They blotted their copybook. And so that was enough for me. I wouldn't want to go back to them. And I don't need television. There's so many other things. I read books more than watch television, and I'm reducing my social media and all of that. But that's for another show. Finally then, Audrey Forbes Hamilton says, loyalty cards, I do use them, but they are a form of manipulation by the companies such as Tesco's and also now in Boots. If you don't have a loyalty card, you're charged a higher price. It's blackmail, really. Give us your personal details or pay up. Yes, this is where we should, I think, be encouraging smaller companies, local companies, rather than the big conglomerates. Although we think that they have a big, wider choice, and we're suckered into looking at the shelves with all those wonderful, colourful things, actually, I think we have to remember the power should be in that of the customer. And we need to find and support smaller companies, more local companies, and, if possible, family-run companies, so that the money stays in the local area rather than just larger. But you may disagree. You may say it's far better that the money disappears to some faceless corporations who will spend it on all sorts of goodness knows what and have all sorts of weird and wonderful policies that actually don't benefit you, the individual. But that's your entitlement. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be interested in your comments about palate changes. Have you changed your palate? Has certain foods no longer interest you? Did you eat fish at one time and perhaps no longer eat fish? Or could you not stand to eat spaghetti but now love it? Be interested in the differences in your palate changes. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye-bye.